If you think you know the people you live with, think again. What if the person you trust most has been hiding a soul in your own home for 30 years? Stay till the end of this story and tell me in the comments what you would have done. Don't forget to subscribe for more true revenge stories that will freeze your blood. The morning smelled like salt and lemon polish. Eleanor Hayes, a retired English teacher in her late 50s, decided she would finally clean the house herself. The Savannah heat pressed against the windows, but she didn't care. She needed to keep busy to fill the silence her husband left every day when he disappeared into his study. Her phone rang. It was Ruth, her childhood friend, passing through town for one day. Coffee, laughter, memories. Eleanor smiled, torn between duty and nostalgia. But then she remembered Cassie, the shy college student who sometimes cleaned houses for extra money. Eleanor called her and offered the job. Cassie accepted instantly. By the time Eleanor reached the Magnolia Cafe, she'd already forgotten about the cleaning. She and Ruth sat under the old oak tree, trading stories, reminiscing about the foolish girls they once were. The sun made the table glow. Everything felt normal. Until her phone vibrated again. She answered with a smile, but what came through wasn't Cassie's usual sweetness. It was terror. "Mrs. Hayes," Cassie whispered, voice shaking. "Is there anyone else in your house?" Eleanor's heart skipped. "No, my husband's out." "Why?" Cassie's breathing trembled. "Because there's a woman upstairs. She's wearing a white dress." The sound of those words felt like ice on Eleanor's skin. "Get out," she said instantly. "Now." She called the police as she ran to her car, the world around her blurring. Every second felt like a lifetime. By the time she reached her house, a patrol car was already there. Cassie sat on the front step, pale as chalk, eyes blank. The officers had searched everything. No intruder, no signs of entry. Every lock untouched. "There's no one here," they told her. Eleanor thanked them, but her stomach refused to calm. Cassie swore she'd seen the woman. The description, the white dress, the messy hair, the vanishing act stuck in Eleanor's mind like a thorn. That night, when Harold, her husband, came home, she told him what happened. He smiled softly, too softly. "You've both been spooked," he said. "Old house, long shadows. You know how your imagination can play tricks." Eleanor frowned. He wasn't even pretending to be concerned, just amused. But she let it go. Days passed. Then weeks. And the strange peace of the house returned until she started hearing sounds. At night, when the clock struck 2, something scraped across the attic floor. Sometimes it was footsteps. Sometimes the rustle of paper. Eleanor tried to rationalize it. Wind, mice, the house settling. But deep down, she knew better. One morning she mentioned it at breakfast. Harold didn't look up from his newspaper. "Rats," he said. "I'll buy traps." He did. And for a while, the noises stopped, but other things didn't. Food began disappearing, leftovers she hadn't touched. A half loaf of bread gone, a package of sausage she'd hidden for herself missing. When she asked Harold, he shrugged. "I ate it." But he hated spicy food. Always had. Then one day, after returning from a short trip, she found the upstairs bathroom floor soaked, as if someone had just showered. The mirror fogged, droplets still sliding down the walls. "Harold," she said, trembling, "it hasn't rained. How do you explain this?" He didn't even look surprised. "Maybe a pipe leak. Don't overthink everything, Ellie." She tried to believe him. She really did, but then she found it. While cleaning Harold's study, a place he guarded like a fortress, Eleanor accidentally knocked over a stack of papers. A drawer popped open. Inside was a small, worn leather notebook tied with string. It wasn't Harold's handwriting inside. Elegant cursive filled the pages, story outlines, character notes, poetic lines that felt alive. And yet familiar. They were the same plots Harold had published years ago. Word for word, Her hand trembled. She flipped through the pages, realizing what it meant. Someone else had written the stories that made her husband famous. She almost confronted him, but something, instinct, maybe fear, made her hide the notebook back where she found it. That night, she couldn't sleep. The clock ticked louder than usual. Then, faintly, she heard it again, the creak of the attic door. She went to wake Harold. But by the time they reached the hallway, the latch was closed, locked tight. He sighed and rubbed his eyes. "You really need rest, Eleanor. You're starting to imagine things." She lay awake until dawn, eyes fixed on the ceiling. For the first time, she wondered if the stranger in the white dress had ever left. And deep down, she already knew the answer. The following night stretched like glass, transparent, fragile, ready to shatter. Harold had begun staying up later, claiming he was writing. Around 10 each night, he'd kiss Eleanor's forehead and disappear into his study. But she knew that click of the door wasn't creativity. It was secrecy. At 1 a.m., she woke to the sound of footsteps again, this time not above her, below. She reached out. The bed beside her was cold. Moving silently through the hall, she saw a faint glow seeping from the stairwell, her husband's flashlight beam swaying on the wall. She crept closer until she saw him halfway down the steps from the attic, barefoot, carrying a porcelain dinner plate. "Harold?" she whispered. He froze. The plate slipped, shattering on the tile. His face went pale before he forced a chuckle. "Couldn't sleep. Got hungry. There's no food on that plate." He crouched, gathering shards with trembling fingers. "You're imagining things again." She watched him retreat, her pulse hammering. That night she didn't close her eyes. By morning, Harold acted as though nothing had happened. He brewed coffee, whistled, and left early. But before stepping out, he turned and gripped her shoulders. "Don't let anyone in while I'm gone. Especially from the publishing house. If my editor shows up, tell him I'm away. Understand?" Eleanor nodded, too stunned to speak. He left at noon. 2 hours later, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole stood Mr. First Sterling, Harold's editor, with a young assistant clutching a folder. Their faces were tight with frustration. "Mrs. Hayes," Sterling said, striding past her into the foyer. "I know Harold's here. We need the manuscript. He's missed 2 deadlines." "I'm sorry," she repeated softly. "He left this morning. I don't know when he'll return." Sterling gave a sharp laugh. "Don't lie. Your neighbor says the attic light burns till dawn every night." Eleanor's stomach turned to ice. The attic light. After they left, she stood in silence, the world shrinking around her. She thought of the missing food, the notebook, the wet bathroom, the plate. Every piece formed one horrific picture that she didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. She fetched the old ladder from the shed. Dust covered its rungs, spiders had claimed its corners. Dragging it through the hall, she positioned it beneath the attic hatch. Her hands shook as she pulled the chain. A stale breath of air slid down, thick with mold and something else, something human. She lifted the door and climbed. Each step moaned under her weight. The beam from her phone cut through the dark, landing on forgotten furniture, cobwebs, old boxes, and a glow. At the far corner, a lamp burned dimly over a makeshift table, papers scattered everywhere. And in front of it sat a figure. Eleanor's throat closed. "Who's there?" The pencil stopped. Slowly, the figure turned. A woman, frail, hair tangled white, eyes sunken deep into her face. The once white dress hung like a shroud. Eleanor staggered back, hand over her mouth. The face was older, thinner, but impossible to mistake. Lydia? Her sister, gone 30 years, the woman the family had mourned and buried in their hearts, sat trembling before her. "Ellie," Lydia's voice was a rasp, a ghost of sound. "You found me." Eleanor ran to her, tears spilling. She touched her sister's arm, skin cold and thin as paper. "Who did this to you? How long?" Lydia's eyes glistened. Since the night everything ended. Downstairs, Eleanor wrapped her in blankets, poured water into shaking hands. The cup clinked against Lydia's teeth. Then came the words that ripped Eleanor's world apart. 30 years ago, Lydia had been a young writer working for a publishing house. Her editor, drunk and predatory, had tried to assault her. She'd fought back, striking him with a marble statue. He'd fallen, lifeless. Harold, then just Eleanor's boyfriend, had walked in. "He said he'd help me," Lydia whispered. "Said he'd protect you from the scandal. He took the body, buried it by the river. Then he brought me here. Said it was temporary." Eleanor shook her head violently. "That's impossible. He married me right after." "I know." Lydia's voice broke. "He said if I left, if I told anyone, you'd lose everything. So I stayed. I wrote to stay sane. Stories, poems, anything. And then he found my notebooks." Her hands trembled as she covered her face. "He said my words were too good to waste, that he'd publish them for me." Eleanor's breath caught. The truth hit like a knife. Every book, every line of prose she'd ever admired, every award, every dollar, they were Lydia's words. Harold had built his empire on her sister's stolen voice. Lydia sobbed. "He made me write through the night. Said the world thought I was dead, so my words belonged to him. I begged to stop. He said if I tried, he'd tell the police everything, that I was a killer, and you were his accomplice for hiding me." Eleanor covered her mouth, choking on disbelief. All the sleepless nights, the attic noises, the missing food, it was all Lydia trying to survive. When dawn touched the windows, Lydia looked at her sister with hollow eyes. "I can't live like a ghost anymore, Ellie. I need to confess. I need this to end." Eleanor grabbed her hands. "Then we'll do it together." They left the house as the sun rose over the moss-covered roofs of Savannah, two broken women walking toward truth no matter how much it would cost. At sunrise, Savannah's air smelled like rain and ghosts. Eleanor drove with both hands clenched on the steering wheel, knuckles white. Lydia sat beside her in silence, wrapped in Eleanor's shawl, eyes fixed on the horizon like she'd never seen the world before. Cars honked, children crossed streets with backpacks. People lived their lives while Lydia breathed her first air of freedom in 3 decades. "Everything's changed," Lydia whispered. "The cars, the phones, the faces. I feel like I died and woke up in another century." Eleanor swallowed hard. "You didn't die," she said softly. "You survived. That's what matters now." When they entered the police station, the clerk barely looked up, but when Eleanor said the name Lydia Ward, the man froze. Files were pulled. Detectives rushed out. The case of the missing writer from 1994, thought to have run away with her boss, was suddenly alive again. Inside a cold gray interrogation room, Lydia told them everything. Her trembling voice filled the space, unfolding 3 decades of horror: the attack, the fatal blow, Harold's deceit, the attic imprisonment, the stolen novels. Every officer in that room went still. Pens stopped, eyes widened. No one breathed until she finished. By nightfall, search teams swarmed Eleanor's house. They photographed the attic, the mattress, the oil lamp, the piles of manuscripts. Then they followed Lydia's directions to the riverbank near the old oaks. Beneath the roots, they found what she promised: human remains wrapped in a decayed tarp. The name Darren Albright, the man the world thought Lydia ran away with, was finally given a grave. That same day, a warrant was issued for Harold Hayes. The police waited near the interstate where his car was last seen. When they stopped him, he didn't resist. According to the officers, he just lowered his head and said, "I was only trying to protect her." But protect who? His wife? Himself? His empire of stolen words? Eleanor didn't attend the arraignment. She sat at home, staring at the attic ceiling, remembering the man who once read her poems by candlelight, the man she thought she knew. Each word he'd ever spoken now felt like an echo of Lydia's ghost. She hired the best lawyer in Georgia for her sister, pleading for mercy. 30 years of imprisonment in that attic, she argued, was punishment enough. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt purpose. She cooked Lydia's favorite soup, packed clean clothes, and even found the old books Lydia loved as a child. She wanted to bring them to her, proof that she was loved, that freedom was waiting. But the call came the next morning. "Mrs. Hayes," a calm, cold voice said. "I'm sorry to inform you, Lydia Ward took her own life last night." The phone slid from Eleanor's hand. The world turned to static. Hours later, at the station, an officer gave her a sealed envelope. "She left this for you." The handwriting, delicate, shaky, was Lydia's. Eleanor read it through a flood of tears. "Dear Ellie, when you read this, I'll finally be free. For 30 years I wrote to keep myself alive, but never under my own name. I lived as a ghost, and now it's time for that ghost to rest. Don't mourn me. Publish my story. Let my real name live where my body could not. With love, Lydia." Eleanor pressed the paper to her heart. "I promise," she whispered. She went back to the attic one last time. The air was cleaner now, the dust disturbed by police lights and footprints. Beneath the table, exactly where Lydia said, lay a small wooden box. Inside were handwritten pages, her final manuscript. The title on the first page read, "The Ghost Upstairs." Eleanor spent the next months editing every line, every comma. She could almost hear Lydia's voice in the margins, guiding her hand. When she finally sent it to the publishers, the same ones who'd once stolen Lydia's words, the editor called her, voice trembling. "This is genius," he said. "We'll publish it under her true name." The book's release shook the nation. Newspapers called it The Ghostwriter of Savannah. Lydia's story, once buried in darkness, burned across headlines and book clubs and talk shows. Her words, once stolen, became immortal. Harold was convicted of false imprisonment, fraud, and obstruction of justice. He'll spend the rest of his life behind steel bars, the kind that echo in the dark, like the attic he built for his crime. Eleanor never attended the sentencing. Instead, she turned the attic into a small library. She placed Lydia's books on clean white shelves and opened the window every morning to let in sunlight. When the wind rustles the pages, it almost sounds like Lydia's laughter again. And in that quiet, Eleanor finally feels peace. Because even though her sister's body is gone, her words, her truth, shine brighter than ever. If this story touched your soul, don't leave yet. Tell me in the comments what you think justice means. Would you have done what Eleanor did? Hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss more true stories of courage, betrayal, and the ghosts that live behind ordinary doors. And remember, no lie stays buried forever.